Alright, now that we kind of laid out how we're going to go about this, we're going to talk about the different methods of cutting out layers and refining them for usage in Cubism. So, I had talked about earlier how you want them to be seamless and have a background so that when they move, one, they don't have a aura around them, and two, there is not just a black void wherever something moves. So if I take out the background and I zoom in, actually this one's clean so it doesn't matter, but if I zoom in on this layer here, for example, it actually looks like I cleaned this one pretty well too, so it doesn't matter. But normally when you're working with this, you would see a kind of black halo around a lot of stuff that you're cutting out. You need to remove that because it really screws up when you're making your background, because you can see this kind of like halo around whatever's moving. Alright, so tools in Photoshop that you will be using. The primary tool that I and most people I would assume use is the curvature pen tool. If you press P and right click that pen, you'll come down to the curvature pen tool. It's another form of the pen tool that allows you to define points and manipulate them as needed, so you can cut out very specific parts of whatever you're going to be working with. Right now, originally I was planning on starting from the bottom to the top, but I believe I'd actually rather begin with the bangs and large parts of the hair, as I'm mainly animating this for my profile picture. I'm sure you kind of deduced that. So I'm going to start with working on the hair first. So there's a couple different ways to go about using the curvature pen tool. Generally, when you're cutting out layers, you're going to start from front to back in order to try to streamline the process as neatly as possible. So right now I'm going to work on cutting out so when you're working with a lot of more anime art styled, you'll notice there's 3 or 4 parts to the eyes that generally, if you're rigging, this is from a more rigging standpoint, but you're going to see the pupil, iris, the eyeball. There's the white, and then you have your lower eyebrow, your upper eyebrow, and then this kind of, I say eyebrow, it's really more like an eyelash, but yes, and then there's the upper eyebrow. Those are the kind of 4 or 5 main parts that you will see when working with any kind of anime styled piece of artwork. So right now I'm going to work with getting the eyebrows out, as it's a very quick redraw. So you can see how I've defined 2 points here, and then I'm going to define another point a little to the left, and you see how I just keep on dragging and adding extra points until it matches perfectly, and then I connect it over here, and once again just adjust as needed. Remember, always move outwards. You're better off having to erase a slight part that is visible, that kind of halo as I had called it, instead of losing parts of the layer that you're cutting out because you cut it out with the pen tool. It's always easier to redraw background shades than full-blown layers. Alright. So, okay. So you see how I've connected it. So you can see it's a straight line. Alright, yep, see I can just kind of zoom in a bit closer, make it look as needed. Alright, so now you'll see there's these 3 channels here. You're going to move to the paths channel, and you'll see work path. Your work path is your pen path. It is what's highlighted, essentially. When this circle is made, it's actually a selection. So you can right click and right here, make selection. We'll click on that. I just use a feather radius of 0 pixels, anti-aliased, so it's essentially only cutting out whatever you have circled, nothing more and nothing less. So there's 2 different ways to go about actually extracting this layer. First, you can Control X, which cuts it, and then you can Control V and paste it. The only issue with doing that is that your layer is no longer centered. And when you try to recenter it, you can see, if you go in closely, how there's this transparent layer that is behind that. That is why I do not recommend doing that if you cannot help it. Unfortunately, generally, you're going to end up cutting it out because it's just kind of how it is. But Control J, Control J has duplicated that. So there's now 2 instances of it. Always remember, name your layers, right eyebrow. You can create folders as well down here. I only ever really use folders if it's a larger project. So now you have 2 layers of this right eyebrow. So if we hide our cutout layer, now we can begin redrawing. When you're redrawing, there's a couple different things that you're going to be using. The calf tool, content aware fill, it's now called the spot healing brush tool. The clone stamp, which allows you to select pixels and essentially copy them, as you can see here in the demo. The content aware fill, as you can see, takes in pixels from the surrounding and attempts to duplicate it. It's actually very powerful, especially in the newer versions of Photoshop. Obviously, your brush tool, your pencil tool sometimes. So for this, I'm going to, J is your shortcut for your content aware fill. I'm going to lower my pen size and just kind of go over this with the content aware fill. The content aware fill has a harder time operating in environments that are highly JPEG'd, like this one. So a lot of times you're better off kind of working on your own as well while doing this, because it's going to try to copy a lot of those JPEG artifacts, and it does not look very ideal. Alt and clicking is your shortcut for your color picker, which allows you to very quickly grab the surrounding pixel colors and duplicate that quite easily. Having a somewhat artistic capability is kind of nice, but you do not need it. If you're bad at art, don't worry. Practice makes perfect, as I've always said, and always will. Alright. So now it's really just going through cleaning it up. Always zoom out, because when you zoom out, you can kind of see what looks blemished and what doesn't. Like you can see how there's mismatching pixels in this. There's parts that just plain don't look right. Yep. That looks good to the naked eye. Alright. And now you can see, voila. We have one right eyebrow, which is now layered, and a solid background. I'll also do that for this one. make those curves. Make sure it's not cutting out too much or too little. Always zoom in closer if you gotta. No point in brushing anything. Make selection. Control J. Left eyebrow. Something that kind of trips people up when you're first working. This is, again, from a more of a rigging standpoint, I guess, but you see it named right eyebrow, even though it's on the left side. That's because if you're standing behind her, you know, that'd be her right eyebrow, not her left eyebrow. Yeah, I've seen that trip a couple people up whenever I'm doing that. Alright, now we're just gonna, once again, same process. Don't over rely on the content aware fill, because it can obviously screw up plenty of times quite easily. And it's not a good idea because of that. So you can see how I'm... Okay, so here's the thing, maybe. So some drawing tablets have this tool. I'm trying to talk while doing this, so it's not too lengthy. Drawing tablets have different capabilities in them. Hopefully your drawing tablet has pressure, is pressure aware. Basically that means your tablet is able to, or generally it's your stylus that's actually the one doing it, but generally it's when your stylus is able to sense how far or how hard you're pressing down. It tells by how far your pen tip is pressed in, but that's another story. That makes life much easier because it allows you to more precisely redraw certain sections. Like, I'll show you in a second what I mean. Finishing up this here, gonna make it a little tighter. Remove some of that artifacting there, and voila. No eyebrows with eyebrows. Awesome. So you can see how when I open up my brush tool, if it wants to let me edit. Okay, I normally do not like using that. I just like, oh yeah, I'm opening up the wrong one. Alright, so you can see how in general brushes, there's also other kinds of brushes that you can download. Like screen tones, if you don't know what a screen tone is, that's a screen tone. It's for shading. If you're redrawing, if you ever want to be a redrawer, having those kinds of screen tones handy is quite helpful. But anyways, you can see how if your pen supports pressure, I would recommend almost always using anything that has pressure next to it. But you can see there's different ones. You have pressure size. Awesome. Okay, my mic decided I was going to cut out there. Epic. Oh, wait. What was I talking about? Oh, yeah. So, there's size, opacity, and flow. You can see there's many different kinds. For example, the soft round. Soft means there's blur at the edges of it, while hard means anything nothing will get drawn outside of the circle, while soft, you're going to have kind of this halo around it. You can see the size. If I press down very lightly, you can see how small. Press down hard, and it's big, like that. It's very helpful when you're trying to mimic another art style, or just plain drawing in general. So I recommend using them. Alrighty. So, working with larger objects. You can see how. I'm going to hide a couple of these here. Oh yeah, so I kind of worked on this a little bit. Alright, so I was trying to anticipate how much is this going to be moving, and compensate for that by doing the background redraws. So you can see how I did not entirely redraw everything. You can see how I figured the arm's going to be moving down slightly and then bouncing back up. So you can see I've redrawn enough section along here where it should look no different than there's not any blockage, and yeah, that's a terrible word. There's not going to be any gaps in it, and it's still going to be visible from every single aspect. I'd actually like to get this area here though. Alright. So you can see how when this is going to move, it's going to pretty cleanly not be noticeable. Alrighty. Working with large areas. For now, I guess I'll be working on this right middle bang right here. So we have our eyebrows hidden. We're going to take out our pen tool. Alright. So, kind of figure out, what do I want to be moving? Well, clearly I want this bang to be moving. There's two different things I could do. I could either cut it out along here like this, or I could cut it out in a more square pattern like this. You can always, when you have a layer, you can always manually define your vectors or your mesh for what's going to be deformed. And because of that, I would rather to take out a larger part than a smaller part, obviously. Alright, so getting to actually taking this out. So once again, we're just going to take our pen tool. Consistency is key along with precision. Try not to take more or less. I know I've said that, but believe me, it helps. So there's kind of two different ways that you could go about taking large sections. You can either click continuously, or you can just take one big line and then work from there. It really depends on how I feel and how big it really is going to be. Let's see, so I've got that cut out now. So I'm going to keep on working here. Got that. I'm going to add a couple extra ones. You can see how adding those extra ones at the end helps me to constrain it from moving, because it's essentially an artificial intelligence that is figuring out how this line's supposed to be getting drawn. And by adding those extra lines, you can constrain it to tell it, I don't want it being moved away from here. It's very helpful. Back to work. If you don't know what artifacts are, if you see these, kind of like distortion along the edges, that is from JPEG. JPEG essentially saves size by compressing, And part of that compressing is creating these artifacts because it's kind of merging pixels into one long simple explanation. That is why working with highly JPEG images can be pretty painful if you're redrawing. Alright. Now, there's enough dots that I believe it's appropriate to just... Dots. Anchor points is the actual term for them, if you're curious. Alright. Am I happy with that? Yes, I am. Work path. Make selection. Doop. Alrighty. Now. Oh, so here's kind of decision making. This falls on whoever's doing its part to kind of what they want to do and how they want to go about it. Normally, I'd probably end up cutting this out, but I believe there's actually a decent opportunity here to just Control J. And start cutting out as needed. Or not cutting, redrawing as needed. So, this is where kind of just... To be honest, personally, I find it almost common sense at some points, but yeah. So you can see how, like, clearly this part here needs to be redrawn. This is when I'm probably going to use the content aware fill instead, because there's a slight gradient along her nose here where you can see it kind of merges from that one color to another. Obviously, you don't want to be redrawing any of the hair here like that. Well, you get what I mean. Like I'm going to clone stamp a bit to make that kind of color pattern. I'm using the size clone stamp. Brush increase. Okay. If you have a pen, you can generally you're able to change the size very easily with one button on the side of it. It's a very nice tool. Try not to be super silent, but can't promise anything. Alrighty. So one thing to keep in mind is you don't always have to go like full-on hardcore redraw, especially for hair and whatnot, because if you really think about it, a lot of the hair is going to just be kind of darker because there's shadows behind it. Like, very few parts of this hair will actually ever be seen by the viewer or rendered in Cubism in general. JPEG. Oop, got people texting me. Alrighty. Does that look good? I'd rather it go the whole way out here. Start drawing. make a base layer, and then you can start blurring it to kind of get that gradient effect as needed. Try to cut out a large amount of those JPEGs artifacts while you're at it. Makes everything look much nicer. Having the opacity also helps with mimicking these kind of gradients much better. You'll get that error if you try to use something like the content aware fill in an area that has 0 pixels in it, generally an empty layer or a layer with very little in it overall. You can see how there is some effort obviously put into redrawing. It's not just cutting out as needed and then kind of bamboozling it as you go. So obviously, there's more hair behind that bang. He's not bald. So that's why you can kind of get away with keeping a large part of the hair here, even if there's not actual. That's why I'm going to take a black pen here and kind of outline. I'm probably going to make a new layer for this. Layer, new layer. See, layering helps in life. Alright, so how do I want this hair to be here? So there's that, and there's that, obviously that background here. There we are. So what did I cut out here? Is that entire? Yes. Oh, right. Probably gonna have it go like that. I'd like to get all that there, so you can see how there's that shadows there. Oop, people DMing me on Discord. Nothing new there. See, like, you cannot use that because there's not enough. Alright, so I'm going to begin kind of using the calf tool here to move those parts that I don't really want. Kind of get some of those JPEG repetitions out of there. Increase my brush size, 14-ish. Now let's start having some fun.